My badge didn't work. That's how it started. I stood there in the cold October wind, waving it over the reader like some desperate idiot trying to will it back to life. Green light never came, just a soulless red blink. I tried again and again. Behind the glass, the receptionist avoided my eyes. I'd been here 11 years. 11. She used to bring me cookies at Christmas. Now she was suddenly on a call. Security finally came. The guy was young, nervous, wouldn't look at me either. Just said, "Sorry, ma'am. Orders from upstairs. You'll need to report directly to the 4th floor." Ma'am. Like I was someone's damn aunt showing up at the wrong DMV. Elevator ride was silent, cold, like the marble in the lobby. I knew what this was. The audit was 6 days out. Everyone was on edge. But this wasn't a mistake. This was something planned. The COO was waiting with a look I'd seen before. That fake polite MBA sneer they practice in the mirror at Wharton. His tie was loose, like he was trying to cosplay approachable. Didn't work. He didn't ask me to sit. "You're non-essential," he said, tapping at some HR dashboard like he was ordering lunch. "We're cutting overhead. Legal has the protocols. Appreciate your service, but it's time to streamline." No warning, no transition, no redundancy planning. Just like that, my access gone. I was the records custodian, the one who'd built the entire audit prep from scratch. I'd literally written the compliance policy. But he waved it off like I was some glorified file clerk with a clipboard and a menopause hotline subscription. Now, real quick, before we go any further, I know most of y'all listen to these stories and never subscribe, but it seriously helps us out. Takes 2 seconds to hit that button and drop a like. It motivates the team and keeps these stories coming. Okay, back to the fire. I didn't argue, didn't scream. That's not how I work. He wanted a reaction. I gave him silence, just reached down, unclipped my badge, and stared at it for a second. That thing had let me into every room in that building, server vault, records room, legal archives, but not anymore. I slipped it into my purse without a word. He didn't notice. He'd already moved on to Slack notifications about Friday's vision alignment lunch. I stood there a second longer, scanning the whiteboard behind him. They'd already reassigned half the audit team. Names I didn't recognize. A junior analyst from marketing had been given access to policy materials. Cute. As I walked out, someone in HR tried to hand me a branded mug and a copy of the separation packet. I left both on the counter. I don't drink lukewarm gratitude, and I sure as hell wasn't going to read some sanitized farewell about pursuing new opportunities. But I did pause at the elevator, just for a moment, looked down the hallway, past legal, where the audit prep servers were humming behind glass doors. The same servers only I had the credential key for. They didn't know it yet, but those doors were already locked tight. From the inside, I left without saying a word. Let them think they'd cleaned house? Let them think they were modernizing? I'd been overlooked so long, they truly believed I wouldn't matter once I was gone. They'd find out soon enough. I didn't even get a damn box. Just an empty recycling bin I dragged from the copy room and lined with an old legal pad. Fitting, I guess. Quietest exit of the year. No cake? No awkward card signed by people who never learned my last name? Just me and 10 years of precision, shredded in 30 minutes. I packed slowly, deliberately. Not out of sentiment, but out of spite. Every binder I slid off that shelf, every labeled thumb tab, every laminated index, it had weight. Not emotional weight, structural weight. I'd built the audit framework from the ground up, before the cloud, before the shiny dashboards, when policy still lived in folders and retention was a thing we manually certified every quarter. They treated it like it ran itself now, like automation replaced ownership. But they never recertified, never revised the retention protocols, because they didn't even know how. It was all still tied to my original framework. I'd been quietly updating it in the background for years. Version control, encryption chain, access dependencies. Nothing public, nothing flashy, just a system built to last, as long as no one yanked the wrong thread. On the desk sat my flash drive, the red one with the chipped corner. Looked like junk. Contained everything. Policy backups, chain of custody logs, credential trees. Not sabotage, not theft, just my work, my copy. I slipped it into my jacket pocket, right next to my badge. Still warm from the elevator pause. People passed my door. Some peeked in. No one came close. No handshakes. No "we'll miss you." Just whispers, like I was already a ghost. Wasn't she the audit point of contact? I thought legal handles that now. She had like all the files though, right? Someone muttered something about the cloud, like that fixed everything. I kept packing, a paperweight from the 2014 audit, the one we passed clean, a mug from the 2017 Compliance Summit, where I gave a talk they never promoted, a photo of my cat taped to a server diagram. I left that one. On my whiteboard was a checklist for the upcoming federal review. I erased it line by line, not out of malice, out of finality. I'd written that schedule, knew every step the regulator would take, every document they'd request. And I also knew exactly how many of those files were accessible without my sign-off. Final thing I took was the old copy of the retention policy, printed and bound. A relic. But page 73 had the clause, the one no one ever reads, the one that stated only a certified custodian with verified access and uninterrupted tenure could present documentation during audit walkthroughs. That clause didn't write itself. I stepped into the hallway. It felt smaller, suddenly, like the building had shrunk without my access card humming through it. A junior analyst nodded at me nervously. I gave her a polite smile. She'd been promoted recently. Nice girl. Not her fault she was about to drown in a sea of acronyms she didn't understand. The elevator dinged. I didn't look back. Not once. Outside, I zipped up my coat. Wind had picked up, leaves scraping the sidewalk like paperclips in a blender. Somewhere behind me, the COO was probably congratulating himself, telling the board how he'd streamlined dead weight. Inside my coat, the flash drive tapped against my badge with every step. They hadn't streamlined anything. They'd just amputated their compliance spine. And the audit clock was already ticking. The COO strutted into the Monday strategy meeting like he'd just invented compliance himself. Fresh haircut, smug PowerPoint, the whole consultant chic getup. First slide, read, efficiency through evolution. Font too big, like everything else about him. Let's call it what it is, he said, pacing like a TED Talk reject. We've modernized, automated, streamlined, no more dead weight. The room stayed quiet. You could hear someone's pen cap click twice. Then nothing. Legal sat stiffly near the end of the table, Janice and Mark, both seasoned, both looking like they wanted to vanish under their lattes. They didn't say a word. Not because they agreed, but because no one wanted to challenge the new king before the coronation. Audit week was too close. Everyone was holding their breath. "What about audit prep?" Mark finally asked, eyes scanning the room instead of landing on the man responsible for detonating it. "We lost our custodian." "We didn't lose anyone," the COO cut in. "We eliminated inefficiencies." Janice's mouth twitched. "We've got backups," he continued. "Cloud redundancy. Legal's got the policy PDFs, and I've assigned a new point person to fill the gaps." He clicked to a slide that read, "Compliance ownership, analyst level." The name underneath made 3 people shift in their chairs. Emma Rhodes. Emma was 2 years out of college, smart, enthusiastic, sweet as hell, and way out of her depth. Her job had been budget forecasting and dashboard metrics. She once called metadata those little tag thingies. Now she was the new custodian? "She's been shadowing," the COO added quickly, like that somehow meant anything. "She's got access. She'll be fine." Access? No one asked how? No one asked what version of the audit protocol she even had, because no one wanted to be the person who sounded resistant to change in front of the golden boy who wore buzzwords like cologne. Meanwhile, things were already breaking. Servers were running slower than usual. The document management system lagged like molasses during queries. Someone in facilities complained that badge logs weren't syncing with the archive entry vault. Legal's shared drive showed file duplicates, timestamp mismatches. IT blamed network strain, but it wasn't the network. It was me. Or more precisely, the absence of the architecture I'd been quietly maintaining for a decade. Nothing flashy, just hundreds of chained scripts and access tunnels built to run silently, efficiently, authenticated by a credential that no longer existed. No one noticed at first. They were too busy nodding through the COO's speech about compliance as a living organism and legacy systems dragging us down. He threw around phrases like agile policy response and auditor-facing flexibility, while Emma sat 2 seats down, blinking rapidly and taking notes like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. The final slide said, "Audit ready by Friday." In the corner, the timestamp read 9:57 a.m. They didn't know it yet, but the house was already on fire. Just a slow one. The kind that eats at insulation and wiring before it ever touches drywall. Silent, invisible, methodical, like I used to be. The confirmation email hit inboxes at 4:02 p.m. Friday. Subject: Federal Records Compliance Audit. Arrival confirmed. Monday, 9:00 a.m. Janice opened it first, read it twice, forwarded it to Legal, the COO, Emma, IT, and, out of habit, me. She must have forgotten I was gone. Or maybe some part of her muscle memory knew where the firewall really started. Within an hour, every printer on the 4th floor was humming. Legal assistants hovered near the conference room, red-eyed and muttering statute numbers. Emma looked pale. She printed 3 different versions of the same flowchart, none of which had timestamps. At some point, she asked if archival indexes were the same thing as policy snapshots. No one corrected her. No one could. Saturday morning, the first red flag waved. Mark tried to run a dry check on the records log archive. The credentials bounced. He pinged IT. It said they could try to restore a backup, but the folder tree that housed the original indexes didn't exist anymore, because it had been classified under my custodian credential. My name wasn't just on the paperwork. It was the access key itself. They tried the cloud instance, Amazon S3, new and shiny, but the buckets were just raw files, no metadata chain, no access history, no time locks, just blobs. Useless to an auditor without the documentation trail to prove how, when, and by whom they were uploaded. Someone tried to reconstruct the document tree manually. Emma spent 6 hours dragging PDFs into folders labeled things like retained and pre-2023 maybe. She uploaded a screenshot of a spreadsheet that referenced another spreadsheet. Legal quietly flagged it as a potential liability. By Sunday, it wasn't panic yet. It was the kind of dull dread that buzzes like a dying light bulb. No one was saying it out loud, but they were circling the same realization, like vultures around a still-breathing deer. An intern from facilities finally cracked the silence, just blurted it out over coffee in the war room. Wasn't all that stuff under her name? Silence, the kind that doesn't creak or hum, the kind that just lands. Janice stared at the table. Emma's pen stopped mid-scribble. Even the COO froze for half a second, just long enough to betray that he knew exactly what the intern meant. Then, as always, he bounced back, leaned forward, voice smooth. We've got cloud backups. Everything's digital now. We're not running a damn library. Someone muttered, "That's not how the policy's written?" He didn't respond. Instead, he called IT and asked if they could just generate fresh audit logs for the review period. IT said no, not unless they wanted to commit fraud. Mark, normally the calm one, rubbed his temples. The documentation's not the point. The chain is. The access. The credential. We don't have the custodian key anymore. The COO barked back. Then make a new one. Janice just looked at him. You can't. That role isn't transferable mid-cycle. It's in the clause. Once revoked, it voids the audit linkage. He laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he had no idea what else to do. And still, no one said my name. Like I was Voldemort with a spreadsheet. But the building knew. Systems lagged harder. The archive indexes threw error codes in red. The dashboard analytics started returning blank tiles. Emma asked what null field mapping meant. No one answered her. Upstairs, the briefcase was already packed. The regulators were coming. On time. By the book. And the book? Well, I'd written it. They just never bothered to read it. Monday, 9 a.m. sharp. The kind of punctual that means federal. The regulator walked in with that look. No nonsense, no small talk, no patience for performative hospitality. Black suit, gray folder, 0 smiles. Briefcase clicked open before he even sat down. No coffee, no handshake, no eye contact beyond the necessary. Janice stood. Mark followed. Emma hovered near the wall like a substitute teacher at parent night. The COO lounged at the head of the table, trying to wear calm like a tailored suit. But his tie was too tight, and his forehead had that pre-sweat sheen. The regulator opened with exactly one question. Please produce your certified records custodian. Just like that. No warm-up, no foreplay, straight to the jugular. You could feel the air leave the room. Janice's mouth opened first, then closed. Her hands found each other under the table. Mark looked at the COO. Emma blinked like she'd misheard. The COO cleared his throat, smiled a little, like he still thought this was a game he could finesse. She's no longer with us. Wrong move. The regulator didn't flinch, didn't nod, just flipped a page in the policy binder with surgical precision. This audit protocol, he said, tapping the page with a pen that clicked once. Requires a credentialed custodian with uninterrupted system-level access for the entire audit cycle. Your policy, Section 14D, makes that credential non-transferable during an active review window. Where is she? He didn't yell, didn't need to. The silence that followed was louder than anything. The COO shifted. We transitioned to a more decentralized framework. We've got backups, redundancies, digital access. No, the regulator said, still not looking at him. You have file storage. That's not compliance. Emma made a soft noise like she might cry. No one noticed. Show me the credential log, the regulator continued, now looking directly at Janice. Custodian ID, continuous access validation, chain of custody signatures for the last retention cycle. Janice's lips barely moved. We don't have access to that system anymore. And why is that? Pause. She was the only certified administrator on that node. The regulator didn't blink, just tapped his watch once. Access invalidated, credentials expired, audit conditions unmet. This constitutes a breach of federal retention protocol under Clause 42B. He clicked his pen shut, looked at Mark now. Effective immediately, your organization is non-compliant. A penalty of $3 million per hour will begin accruing until a certified custodian is reinstated and all documentation can be verified with unbroken chain access. The COO sat bolt upright. Wait, what? That's $3 million what? Per hour, the regulator repeated, standing. Starting at 9:00 a.m. You're currently, he checked his watch, 13 minutes into your breach window. Janice exhaled sharply. Mark muttered something that sounded like, Jesus Christ. Emma dropped her pen. The COO stood up too fast, knocking his chair back. There has to be a workaround, a clause, something. There is, the regulator said, adjusting his tie. Clause 14D, the one you violated. Then he packed the briefcase, slow and final, left it open just long enough for everyone to see the sealed violation forms inside. Call me when she returns, he said, stepping toward the door, assuming she still works here. The door clicked shut behind him. No echo, just the kind of silence that only exists in buildings where something irreversible has happened. 13 minutes, $650,000. The clock didn't care about apologies. Janice was on the phone before the regulator even left the parking lot. Voice low, fast, surgical. We need reinstatement protocol now, retroactive if possible. Find her contract, pull the credential certificate, and someone get the system logs. I need to know the exact moment her access was revoked. HR was already in the basement, dragging out paper files like it was 2007. The COO kept shouting about digital signatures, and there's gotta be a patch. But patches don't fix obliterated roles. And legal doesn't do magic, especially not on Federal Audit Week. By 10:12 a.m., Mark had a whiteboard filled with red marker scribbles. Custodian chain, credential root, clause 14D, circled 4 times and underlined in panic handwriting. Emma was somewhere between hyperventilation and tears. She'd tried to run a credential sync on the archive server and got locked out by the system itself. It escalated the ticket internally, then externally, then sent a 1-line reply no one wanted to read. Access denied. Keychain authentication expired. Custodian ID terminated. That was it. That was the moment they knew. The whole system, the vault, the logs, the time-stamped chains of document custody was tied to one singular credential. Mine. Not because I was being possessive, but because the policy said it had to be. I wrote that clause years ago after sitting through a 6-hour webinar on federal continuity standards. Section 14D, custodian identity must remain active, unique, and singular during any active audit cycle. They hadn't reassigned it. They hadn't even tried. They just deleted it. The COO stood in the middle of the war room like a man watching his Tesla roll into a lake. He looked down at his iPad like it might apologize. Why didn't anyone tell me this clause mattered? Janice looked up from her legal pad, dead-eyed. It's in the policy. You signed off on the review last quarter. He blinked. I skimmed it. Mark's laugh was short and violent. You skimmed a federal compliance document? The COO snapped. Why the hell would anyone make a system that breaks this easily? Janice's voice dropped an octave. Because the alternative is fraud. In the corner, Emma muttered. We tried to assign me as the new custodian, but the system said it needed the original credential chain. It is the chain, Mark said. The system is her. Every document, every audit trail, every access verification node, signed, sealed, and time-locked under a profile that no longer existed. At 11 a.m., a junior associate from legal tried to reach out to the regulatory liaison. The response was immediate and cold. Non-compliance acknowledged. Reinstatement requires original credential and uninterrupted access log. Until then, penalty continues. They were now $2 million deep in fines. The CFO hadn't even been looped in yet. He'd come back from PTO to find a financial black hole shaped like a woman they all called non-essential. The COO sat down hard in the nearest chair. Okay, we'll just bring her back, rehire her, reset the chain. Janice didn't look up. You can't. He blinked, confused. You didn't furlough her, she said. You didn't transition or suspend her credential. You terminated her. The chain was voided by deletion. There's no going back. Silence. Then the IT rep added, and even if we did rehire her, the system still flags that break in access. Once voided, it's unrecoverable. That's the design. The COO rubbed his forehead, then stood and pointed at Janice like that somehow made him in charge of logic. Fix it. Pay her off. Bribe someone. Janice finally looked up, tone flat as printer paper. You didn't just delete her login. You deleted the keystone. You pulled the one pin holding the whole damn framework up. He didn't respond. Couldn't. Because in his desperation to be lean, fast, modern, he'd killed the one thing the law didn't let him automate. Me. I was 3 sips into my second black coffee when the text came through. The screen lit up like it knew what kind of morning they were having. GC, urgent, please. We'll contract you back. Name your rate. We'll make it right. Just respond. I didn't. Not right away. The cafe was quiet. Just me, the barista humming some Fleetwood Mac remix, and a couple of grad students arguing about code syntax 2 tables over. I had the corner seat by the window, the kind where sunlight spills in just enough to remind you the world keeps turning whether corporations implode or not. My phone buzzed again. Same sender. The COO has no authority anymore. We're begging you, help us stop the clock. It was always about the clock with them. Time as a ledger, time as a threat. But now, time was mine. I set the phone down face first. Let the desperation bake a little. Let them stew in the silence they'd mistaken for compliance all these years. Because silence wasn't surrender. It was data acquisition. Next to my coffee cup sat a crisp manila folder. Not dramatic, not red-stamped or watermarked, just clean and exact, like everything I'd ever done. Inside, a printed copy of the compliance manual, annotated, sectioned, signed on the final page, bottom right. My signature in blue ink, the original copy. The one legal always used to refer to as the gold standard. I slid the folder a little closer to the edge of the table. Not for anyone else, just for me. A reminder. I hadn't been non-essential. I'd been the axis, the keystone, the silent node everything else whispered through. People like me don't get parades or farewell emails. We get removed with line items and acronyms. But we also don't burn things down when we leave. We just stop holding them up. Another buzz. This one from Janice. If you come back under contract, you can set your rate. Retroactive pay, full control of credential. We'll reinstate everything. I stared at that one a little longer, the part about control, as if I ever really lost it. Outside, someone tripped over a rental scooter and cursed at the sidewalk. The barista chuckled. I took another sip. In the old days, I would have jumped, responded within minutes, offered a 32-point recovery plan and a polite smile. But I wasn't that woman anymore. They didn't just revoke my badge. They freed me from the illusion that they'd ever respected what I built. So I let the messages stack, left them on red like the receipts they were. And as the sun warmed the edge of my folder, I leaned back, folded my arms, and waited. Because power doesn't always come with a raised voice or a slammed door. Sometimes it looks like a woman in a worn blazer, drinking bitter coffee beside a compliance manual no one else thought to read. Until it was too late. The boardroom was silent, except for the dull hum of the speakerphone and the clink of someone's cufflink nervously tapping against a coffee mug. It was Tuesday morning now. They were 24 hours and $72 million into the fine window, and the CFO looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. The emergency session had been called at dawn. No niceties, no pastries or catered spread. Just suits with bloodshot eyes, and board members dialing in from vacation homes and corner offices, trying to understand how one mid-level compliance lead had financially kneecapped a company valued north of $500 million. The COO wasn't even in the room. He'd been quietly removed from the audit process at 4:17 a.m. No press release, no farewell speech. Just a pink-faced stumble out of the war room with his personal effects in a paper shredder box. He didn't speak. Probably couldn't. In his place stood General Counsel, sleeves rolled up, voice like broken glass. He didn't bother with a slideshow. Without her, he said, we are incurring $72 million per day in regulatory penalties. That's excluding the downstream liability exposure. That's just the clock. That's just for existing in breach. One of the older board members squinted. You mean we can't just assign someone else? Temporarily? Janice, voice cracking slightly, answered. We tried. The system is locked. Access requires an unbroken credential chain. The custodian role was deleted at the root. Not transferred, not suspended, voided. It's in the clause. Section 14D. We're the ones who wrote it. A younger member, probably finance, pushed her laptop forward. Isn't this just bureaucracy? We bring her back, reissue credentials, we solve the issue. General Counsel shook his head. No, because the moment her credential was terminated, the certification timestamp was invalidated. We voided our own compliance continuity. Reinstatement doesn't erase the break. Regulators don't care about apologies. They care about audit integrity. Someone whispered, "So, we fired the one person who could stop this." Silence again. The chairman leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Then bring her back. Offer her anything. Fix it." Janice spoke before anyone else could. "She's not answering." That landed like a dropped brick. "We sent contract offers," Mark added. "Retroactive pay, full authority. She'd left them on red." "She's doing it on purpose," someone hissed. "No," Janice said, almost a whisper. "She's just letting us feel it, the weight of it, of what we threw away." The chairman turned to legal. "You said she was non-essential." Mark didn't flinch. "That's what he said?" Nodding toward the now empty seat where the COO used to sit. "She was essential enough to design a protocol that made herself the only certified gatekeeper, and we all signed off on it. We just didn't think she mattered." The CFO finally spoke, quiet, cold. "We're hemorrhaging liquidity. At this rate, our quarterly earnings will implode. Ratings will drop. Investors will walk." Another board member leaned back, exhaled hard. All because one woman was too competent to replace and too quiet to remember. No one argued. Outside, the glass windows overlooked a skyline worth billions. Inside, the cost of silence stretched higher with every passing hour. And somewhere, not here, not with them, she was sipping coffee while the building that ignored her slowly sank into its own arrogance. The calendar invite hit my inbox at exactly 8:03 a.m. Subject line: "Urgent Records Custodian Reinstatement." Sent by the CEO himself. No assistant. No generic HR alias. Just his name, his title, and the desperation of someone watching a financial hemorrhage with no tourniquet in sight. Inside the body of the invite was a single line. "We're offering $750 per hour, full retroactive pay, and contract authority. Please respond immediately. We need you." I stared at it for a long time, not because I was tempted, because I wasn't, but because I wanted to appreciate the poetry of it all. The last time that man had acknowledged me was a firm handshake in an elevator back in 2019, when I'd quietly fixed a documentation error that would have cost them a licensing agreement. He'd smiled like I was the janitor who unclogged the executive toilet. Now here he was, all caps, urgent, offering $750 an hour to the same woman they cut loose with a generic "thank you for your service" line and a branded mug. I clicked decline, but not before typing one sentence in the response field. Clause 14D. Policy void upon unilateral revocation. Custodianship is not transferable. Send. That was it. No profanity, no rant, no gloating, just policy, served back cold. I closed the laptop, refilled my coffee. The barista had started to learn my name. Quiet mornings, no emails, no war rooms, just silence, real silence, the kind you earn. Back at their headquarters, the clock didn't stop, because the clause didn't care about feelings. It didn't pause for red faces or regret. It didn't care about last-minute bonuses or boardroom tears. The regulators kept the timer running. The systems stayed locked. The documents stayed buried behind credentials they could no longer replicate. And the company paid for every tick, every blink, every breath they spent pretending I didn't matter. They didn't lose because I sabotaged them. They lost because I left. And in that silence, as the hours rolled forward and the fines piled up, my voice finally echoed, not as a scream, not as vengeance, but as compliance. They said I was non-essential. The law disagreed.